So let me tell you a little bit about this company. They are a company that you would know. But because of my relationship with them, I'm not going to say their name because I'm not allowed to do that. But they are a very well-known innovator in manufacturing and distribution. They do a lot of new product development. They make consumer household products. And they're in 150 companies. 25% of the world population use their products daily. And they are number 1 or 2 market share in 80 countries. So, I mean, the whole point of that is this is a big company. There's a lot of breadth. So what does that mean when you're trying to do change? Really slow, right? So, you know, this was a big challenge. Now, they have 800 IT professionals globally, plus they have a very large global extension where they've outsourced a lot of their IT outside of the company. So this is the company that I'm going to share with you their journey as a template for, I think, some ideas of some things that go well and maybe things that didn't go so well. We can learn by both, right? That's what the whole idea of plan, do, check, adjust is that we're constantly learning from the experiments that we try. So maybe you can learn off their shoulders. This is the general timeline for this company. It started in 2008 with the discovery of lean and what it might mean for them, the launch of it, developing a team, introducing it, expansion, and finally up to 2012. So I'm going to take you through each of these steps and what happened in each of these steps in terms of introducing lean to the IT organization. This story is going to start out talking more about lean for IT, okay? So we're going to start there, but you're going to see that it's going to shift over to IT for lean. Okay, so discovery. How did discovery happen? Well, this company actually, just like in the prior map, they started with lean in operations, and they had a fairly robust lean effort in their operational area. It started in England, came to their corporate headquarters in the United States, and the way their IT was organized in terms of supporting the business was that they have a group of people that would be called the IT business partners for manufacturing. And their job was to work with manufacturing and understand what their needs were going to be to define application changes, infrastructure requirements, et cetera, that they would need and bring that back to the core IT organization to get those changes made. So while operations had started with lean, this manufacturing IT group reached out and they wanted to do a workshop to understand what would likely be the changes that they would want to make in their software to support the changes that were happening operationally. So that was the first sort of connection point. The second connection point outside of operations for this company was that their CFO was going to have a worldwide finance managers meeting and wanted to introduce lean concepts to this group. But the funding for this meeting got cut. And so they were only able to bring in about a third of the finance people. And they wanted to have an introduction, sort of like a mini introduction to lean for the finance folks so that they could see what it was all about, so they could decide, should the accounting part of the organization do this? So they took 3 problem events, and simultaneously they did some problem solving using process mapping, current state process mapping, identifying the problem, brainstorming solutions, and implementing change in this 3-day this week of workshops. Now, it just so happened that at that meeting was a senior member of the IT staff, and he saw this experience that finance was going through. So what did they decide to do? First, he went back and he talked to his CIO to get approval to do a trial, to learn a little bit about lean, to see if this might be the solution to this problem of, same as last year, resources and growing demand. Well, this organization, like so many others, immediately had the aha moment, which was, we have no idea what we're doing. We have no idea how this part of the IT group relates to this part. Our customers aren't happy. I mean, it was just, you didn't have to scratch the surface very deep, right? And you could see that there was, it was just so obvious there was room for improvement. And I remember there was sort of this, moment that sort of lives on in the culture where this key manager who had gone to this prior meeting and brought it in, he had, in portfolio management, we had gone through all this work, this first, year before, speccing out all of the jobs, and then deciding the sequence and all these approval processes. It was an elaborate process, took hours and days of full-time people's jobs involved with this. I remember him standing up and he's saying, a question we asked, which was, what will be the IT requirements next year? He said, we thought this was the size of the question we were asking, and this was the work that was happening in the organization to answer that question. And there was no visibility between management and the people doing that work that question had turned into this much work. So this was a very defining moment for this organization that said, there's opportunity here. There is a lot of opportunity for improvement. So what they needed to do was to really dedicate then these resources that they identified, to dedicate them, they decided to dedicate people to this lean learning, this lean initiative. Initially, all the people were located, that were selected were in the US, okay? Even though this was a global organization. And they first worked on, what does it mean to be part of this team? Because we always have to answer the question of, what does this mean to me as a person? Is this a good thing for me to do for my career? So they developed scope and objectives for their lean team. They actually had we created a calendar over time of about 6 quarters, and then by month, and very specific of what you're supposed to do. So you're supposed to read this book here, and you're supposed to put this together. Very structured. We created a structure that people could then behave doing the things they were told to do at first, so that they could start to learn and then understand what needed to change. So we created this plan, personal development, introduced lean to the organization, and tried this at the beginning was just to build awareness. Our goal for this first 6 quarters was only to build awareness. We didn't even have any goals about how much time we would take out of the process or cost reduction. That was not part of the equation at all. It was just to build momentum towards change within the organization was the stated goal. So just to get that rock, moving, it takes the most to get it started. But to do that, we had to answer the question for people, what does it mean to me? So people knew that they were going to be, if they were on the lean team, they were safe. So that was just the starting point. They just were safe if you were on the lean team. You knew that if the lean effort didn't go, there was something else good for you in the organization. Because how did they know? Because they picked all really top performers. So, they had confidence. They could see that it wasn't somebody on the team that was a peer that was a poor performer. They knew everyone on the team were people that were high-performing individuals. What company would get rid of these people, right? So it gave a sense of confidence that, well, maybe this is a good thing to try. Maybe I should be part of this team. So the first part was developing the team. And then what they did to get this rock moving is they offered Kaizen events, and they were consultant-led Kaizen events initially. And the events were selected based on spot problems that they had. It wasn't some big strategic, this is the most important area to stop. But let me just give you some examples of some of the initial processes that they worked on. They worked on the small enhancements process of identifying that one was needed and responding to it. Regulatory compliance was one of the processes they worked on, where they kept the information so that they could prove that they were compliant. Integrating infrastructure requirements into the initial portfolio proposal. Nightly production constraints. They were having some problems with getting everything run in the overnights, and so coming up with, what could we do about that? They had a training team that developed all the training materials for new applications, and that process was bogged down and people didn't like it. Security access into the system. And SharePoint deployment was another one. They had a big, huge backlog of people that wanted to start using SharePoint. And they had a registration process that you had to go through before you could implement a SharePoint. So they did lean efforts there. Even Sarbanes-Oxley, which is the rules about how you sign off on your financial information, and they even did a little Kaizen on how to keep the CIO out of jail, basically, for signing off with having done the reviews. So it was very point problems, but they used these point problems, and they got a lot of saving. I mean, they got a lot of benefit out of doing these point initiatives. I mean, they tried to keep track of, how much lead time was reduced and if there was any direct cost spending. And, they kind of kept track of that. But the main goal, they all knew it, was to get the momentum building that there might be a new way to solve problems within the IT organization. So that was really what this was about. Now, as well as having this sort of Kaizen event approach, they also launched with what they called quick and easy, but really it's just a managing for daily improvement. It's engaging employees on identifying what could be improved, making improvements within their work on an ongoing basis. And I think that's very, very important that they identify that you want to have both parts of the equation starting together. Because, out of Kaizen events, you do not get sustainment unless you have some sort of, ongoing managing for improvement. You're never going to get it right in the event, so you're going to need to do ongoing. So the combination of the two is how they launched that. They began to teach tools. So they began, within the Lean team itself, they started to learn about the 8 ways, Kanban, visual management. These were the theory that they really started with first in learning about them, so that when they were doing quick and easy boards and when they were doing Kaizen events, that they could use these tools. And then at this time, they began to add extended team members. And this is really where they began to do the global grab. So they identified people in their different, in the IT organization globally, and they would pull them into the team. They weren't full-time. They were part-time, but they would be part of the education sessions, and they would sometimes even be on Kaizen events remotely by the phone. I mean, I can't imagine how horrible that must have been for some of those folks to be sitting there on the phone all day long for a whole week. It'd be terrible. But it was to introduce. It was just to hear what it was about, to not be isolated. And so this was how they first got started, getting the ball rolling. And in a way, it was very, very inexpensive for them because they used existing employees, and they didn't go out and hire a bunch of new people. So they had consultant expense, they had some travel expenses, but other than that, this was a fairly inexpensive way to get started. Now, in 2010, then, they continued their Kaizen events, including some of these that I've just mentioned to you. But they created a focus on educating everyone in IT, and they created for themselves a Lean education and that they took around the world. So they took the program around the world and would teach people about Lean in the IT organization. Then they had goals to get 100% of people, I think it was 80% of the people had gone through the IT training, and they achieved that. They also really started to work cross-functional. Before, they'd been a very siloed, even within the IT organization. So they began to work less siloed and more cross-functional. And again, the start of that was their Kaizen events because they had cross-functional team membership. So they got to just even know each other a little bit and could work together. They did set some metrics for their team this year, and I've put them up here. The number of people trained, the number of people in events, how many quick and easy improvements were made, and the number of events held. So can you see this is all structural? This was like, are we implementing the structure that we identified of having training, having events, having quick and easy? So it was create the structure first. Don't, the behavior and the thinking different would come later. Let's at least create a structure for doing work differently and thinking about improvement differently. They also wanted to make sure that the people on their lean team had the skills to drive this forward. And so what they did is they identified different skills that they wanted their lean team members to understand. And then they began to evaluate themselves using the sort of 4 quadrants that they know about it, they can use the tool with help, they can use it, they're fully able to use the tool, and then they could teach others. So this gave the lean team members something to answer the question of what should I be working on? What should I be learning to enhance my skills to lead lean in the organization? I think people liked it. Again, it was some structure around it, told people what was important. And we all know that just by learning those things alone does not make you a lean expert. But it's the underpinnings to begin to understand what lean's about, to begin to change your behavior and thinking. Then in 2011, something interesting happened. And this might be the good news or the bad news. You take it however you want. The work that IT was doing was starting to get some attention outside of IT. And so the rest of the overhead functions or support functions, whatever you want to call it, decided that they wanted to adopt lean as well. And so they went after it, though, a little bit different way. And what they did is they selected a consulting firm guide, but it was set up as sort of like lean or Six Sigma. You know, lean or Six Sigma. It was just like going to be this fight, and which is never really happy situation. So Six Sigma was integrated pretty strongly in terms of what they selected to do. And then the other thing that they did that was different than what IT did was they pre-selected problems. They had a consulting firm come in and evaluate the organization and identify what were the biggest problems that they had or the biggest opportunities they had. So real traditional consultative approach. And then they took those problem areas and began to, they evaluated the current state prior to the event. So rather than the team members in a Kaizen event seeing what the current state was and learning from it and really feeling it. Somebody earlier today said, you know, we put information on the charts by hand so we can really feel the numbers and feel the information. They removed the current state evaluation out of the event. They had it done in advance. You know, it really was not the way that IT had been driving lean and the approach that they had been using. So it created quite a bit of confusion in the organization because there was what they were doing and having some success with and some failures and sort of this new way. And so there was some confusion. So it also, this sort of check-the-box mentality started at this point. It was like, well, because it's a corporate initiative to do lean, then I have to run a Kaizen event, or I have to do this. It was very programmatic at this point. The good news was that the existing IT team members, their career development that they had gotten by being part of this was really paying off for them because they had learned these underpinnings. And so when there were opportunities either on the corporate team or on this larger team, they were very highly sought after resources. So from a skill development, it was very successful in that regard. They also at that point then added some new team members to replenish the people that had gone off and been promoted and began to take those same people through the existing training programs that they had developed initially and had taken ownership from. Okay. Now, in 2012, this year, they've now taken a little bit of a shift. At the beginning, I mentioned lean for IT and IT for lean. So at the end of 2011, over 80% of every IT professional in the company had been exposed to lean. A very high percentage of the groups had what they called quick and easy boards of focus on daily improvement. There were different methods. And there had been these Kaizen events. So there'd been broad underpinnings within the organization. But they weren't happy with the results that they were getting. They realized that it really had not been adopted as their way of managing. It was the lean teams thing. It really wasn't management. Even though I would say, compared to many companies I run across, their senior management played a more active role, it certainly wasn't what you would really want it to be. And there's this confusion. Today, during the different speakers, I've heard consistently about this middle manager group, that there's confusion. What's my role? What am I supposed to do in a lean environment? And so this company was no different. And so what happened was they wanted to, one of the leaders who was very business partner facing, his part of the organization worked with the internal customers, so sales and product development and marketing. So so now they're reaching out to this sort of IT for lean, right? They're moving in that direction. How can we get those people really understanding about lean? And they said, in our group, we're going to focus all of our lean efforts on this part because they have the most impact to our customers. We're going to take all this effort and we're going to focus it there, and we're going to teach the leadership in this part of IT to see problems, experience problems, and do problem solving. So they shifted their effort to really focusing on the leadership in this one very important part of the company. So instead now of lean, the lean team leading lean, the lean team members now support the leaders in this part of the organization to try to really help them learn how to lead with lean. Additionally, there was some continuation of organizational development of the lean team. As I mentioned, the first IT lean leader got promoted into a more senior position. Now, the person that they selected to replace him, I remember him. When the first Kaizen event he was in, he was one of these, he's got his arms crossed, and he's like looking around, like, what is this stuff? It's really kind of a combative kind of stance in all ways. Well, wouldn't you know, it turns out he's the guy that raises his hand later after he had seen what was going on and said, I'd like to be a leader of the lean team. His learning had changed his perspective. He also saw that this was a good career opportunity, was to be part of this initiative because they had promoted people out. There were a number of the individual contributors on this lean team who became first-level managers during that 2-year period of time. And their knowledge that they had gained and their perspective across the organization was really valued. And so that became how they've started to seed the leadership of the organization. I wouldn't call it a victory yet. I don't think that they've you can't be a leader in the organization unless you've come through the lean team. But I think they're really starting to see that to change leadership, there's only so much we can tell people to do. But that experience of being on the lean team and being part of these change efforts really helped embed that knowledge. Now, there is a risk here. Some people can get pretty comfortable in this lean leader role and see it as like, well, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I actually believe that that's a real risk. I think that it's much better to not see lean leadership as a job, but as a career development, a skill development opportunity on the way to doing the work that actually your customers pay for. So I'm a little concerned here that there are a couple of, I know there's at least one, I think a second team member that isn't rolling back into the workplace quite as quickly as I think they should to really get value from the organizational development opportunity of this lean team. Now, so this was this is kind of the picture, I think, in terms of what this organization, and actually I think this picture applies to accounting, I think it applies to HR, all of these sort of the service part of our responsibility is the triangle on the left represents work being done. And like in our organization, most of the work in the IT department or in the HR department, the accounting department was transactional, paying the bills, hiring people, keeping the servers going. Some work on analysis. In other words, what did those transactions mean? What does it mean to us? And very little time on consulting. What does this mean for the future? You know, what could we, based on what's happened so far, what kind of decisions should we make that would actually impact the future of the company? And so this was the picture of just sort of turn this upside down and say what we really want to do in IT and HR and accounting is we really want what our business partners, what our customers want, our internal customers and external customers. We want consultative support. We want somebody to help us figure out how to deal with technology, how to leverage technology, how to create new products with technology, how to communicate, how to use the information better. Yeah, we know you got to do some transaction stuff, but we don't really care about that. What we really want is consultative and analytical. So this is the picture we created, and we said, look, we don't know how we're going to get there. In fact, one of the things I love about lean thinking is that we set goals without any idea of how we're going to get there, right? Set a goal, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but at least I have a target. And now I can really use the true genius in our organization to figure out how to move to some place in the future and to think big. You know, 5% goals, they're so boring, right? There's just so like somebody already knows the answer. I'm trying to guess what they already know. And in this case, you know, we really want to set big goals. Like we had no idea how to get here. But we wanted to move so that most of our effort was consultative. And so this is what this company was trying to do, is to move more of their resource towards having time for consultative behavior because, you know, that's what the organization really wanted. So what's the sort of the summary and the results for this particular company? Well, first of all, Lean needed to become a business strategy as opposed to just an initiative that they were doing. It started as an initiative and of something to do. And it's really at a critical junction of will it become the way that you manage. Now the good news at this company is they've had enough of these people that have been part of this lean effort. They're now managers. So they've already, you know, they already drank the Kool-Aid. So they're now in management roles. And I'm seeing this with other companies too, where people promote out into other companies or other jobs, and they are more committed to lean leadership than ever. So I think, you know, that's that point where it's like, is this going to be who we are? Is it really a strategy? The other learning here is you cannot, you know, this company realizes you cannot just Kaizen event yourself to improve performance. You have to have some kind of managing for daily improvement, problem solving, plan, do, check, and adjust, daily stand-up meetings, something that sort of really engages the organization in taking ownership for improvement within the company. Also, the commitment of free resources. You can't really change an organization if you're not going to put any resource on it. You know, if you have an 800-person organization and you think you're just going to go to a few meetings every once in a while and change the organization, obviously it's not going to work, is it? We all know that. So they committed, but they committed free resources. They didn't backfill people. They said, look, we've got continuous improvement going on, but it's not coordinated. Let's pull it together and create some, you know, momentum. Let's create some mass with this so that we can really get something out of it. And really the value of a coach, not a consultant. You know, the coach role, which is to help teach, but not to tell what to do, not to give the answer. And I think that they really preferred the method of the coach versus the consultant. When the consultant approach came in, it felt a bit heavy-handed to them. And also, they learned it's not a quick fix. But in the first year, I had the number wrong before, they did get, the second year, they had 95% of their people had some lean training. 30% had been involved in a Kaizen. By year 3, they had full global involvement. All of their global locations had been involved with lean efforts. They did, in fact, achieve zero overhead growth, so they were able to meet their needs without adding to their cost pool. And this 4th year, they're actually up 300% in terms of application delivery. So it's starting to have an impact in terms of actually being able to get more done with existing resources. And in fact, they've also, in a few strategic cases, begun to pull work inside that had been outsourced. So they're starting to make some progress. And I'm going to really stop there with their story. It's a story of sequence. It's a story of trying some things, not knowing exactly if it would work, but try it, learn from it. Organizational development, I think, is a huge part of how we need to think about lean in our organizations. I'm going to leave this slide up here. If you have any questions, I'll just leave this up here. I'll tell you where this came from. When Ori Fume and I wrote Real Numbers, there's something called an generally accepted accounting principles, and so we wrote our lean generally accepted accounting principles. So when I wrote Easier, Simpler, Faster with Dwayne, we created 10 IT principles that we thought were sort of underlying, and at that time, if there's anything interesting there, I'd be glad to talk about it.
Thank you.